Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be speaking to you all today. Maybe we'll start with an easy one. If you could just kick off with a brief introduction to this absolutely beautifully executed animated film, Charlotte. What can audiences expect when they watch it? So let's kick off.
I can take it. They'll expect to see the life of an incredibly talented painter, a woman we all should know much more about, whose focus to create a meaningful, amazing piece of work never faltered despite the rise of Nazism in Germany, despite living as a refugee, despite some heartache and really serious problems of mental illness in her family. So it's heavy, but at the same time, super hopeful.
And it sort of seems like one of these incredible, things where how is it more people don't know about Charlotte Solomon? So even though, her work has been displayed places, I know there's been other kind of documentaries and other films made, it's kind of not had sort of mainstream recognition in lots of ways. But maybe she's had a bit of a cult following, particularly of, life or theatre. So maybe you could just talk a bit about the genesis of the project, how you came to her work and what just compelled you to say, right, this needs to be an animated film.
Yes, I'll jump in there because everything you're saying is really correct. Being somebody who has an art history background at school, and I've gone to my share of museums and galleries. I'd never heard of Charlotte Solomon before, and I almost feel embarrassed to say that, but many people haven't heard of her, and I do think that was really intriguing when I learned about her and I read the script. Why isn't she more well known? Her paintings are beautiful, vivid renditions of her life, and Life for Theater itself is such an incredible work, being paintings with text and suggestions of music, and almost like the staged play in a book. So I was really struck by everything that Charlotte Solomon created, and really wanted to, once I learned about her story and came across the script, really wanted to be a part of being able to communicate her story and who she is and who she was to an audience in an effort to make her more well-known and make her more mainstream. And I think it does take these sorts of efforts, because I'll tell you one thing, once people learn about Charlotte, then they really get hungry to explore and understand what she went through and her struggles with her family life and her coming of age through the Second World War. So it is a really fascinating story, and I think that a testament to that is just how many people, once they learn about her, either want to be part of the project or, Google her name and get Life at Theater. So I think that you're right. It's a shame, but I think this will go a long way, hopefully, in getting her story out to the mainstream.
And I guess coming to kind of some of those decisions that you make along the way, I mean, first of all, to do it as an animated film, I mean, I guess in some ways maybe that seemed obvious because of the nature of, her being a visual artist and kind of making this graphic novel kind of for the first time. But, what kind of opportunities does it afford you kind of using the medium of animation and deciding to do it in sort of 2D, mostly hand-drawn, not using kind of the black marks like she didn't do in her art. And of course, it's quite a lengthy process. So maybe you can tell us a bit about the journey to how it looks, the look and feel of the film.
I'll let Eric speak about this. I'll just start with, it did seem like a natural sort of thing. Charlotte being a visual artist, being tell her story. Also, again, really wanting to showcase her own work in a way to kind of express to the audience like how amazing her work is. So really making that front and center was a big priority for us. We went through a lot of development with the overall art direction. And I think initially we did want to sort of utilize Charlotte's own voice as an artist in terms of how do we render these characters. She painted in a very expressionist style. So I think as we sort of went further into development, it made more sense to kind of ground the characters in a more realistic look, in a way to kind of service the story, which did have some elements to it that were less whimsical and fantastical, as you'd seen in other animated films and Charlotte's expressionist style. So I think that's how we kind of ended with the overall art direction that we did. But we were also able to kind of create a nice separation between the world and the universe of Charlotte the film, and also Charlotte's own painting, so that when we did kind of go into our art transitions, when we showed Charlotte's work, it made sense that this is how she viewed the work, her world, through her own paintings. But also we were able to, and I'm really happy with, and one of the most rewarding parts of the film was being able to deconstruct Charlotte's film and having her brushstrokes come to life and render her style. And I think that was a really nice juxtaposition that we were able to use, versus Charlotte's style versus her own, versus our film. And Eric, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, as artists, we create, but sometimes we have to remind or reveal some, other artists, and this is part of it. And so basically, we wanted to really put Charlotte in the front. So we use many tools or ingredients. There are some arts. One part is the artistic direction, and another part is the way, the directing. So that's two things. So for the first one, for the artistic direction, we wanted to use colors, for example, as a way to.
Now we've lost him.
I think he's lost in thought, actually.
He seems lost in thought, but it's great to hear both Eric and Tahir talk about things in detail. And I think your initial question also contains the answer, which is that she drew her life story. We needed to also draw her life story and follow her sort of formal lead. I mean, she did sort of pioneer the graphic novel at a time when people weren't doing that. So we took on doing an animated film based on a true story for adults with a really tragic story. So also something that doesn't get done a lot too.
Definitely. And of course, we have to mention your absolutely incredible voice cast. I mean, I have to say, I'd sort of, already seen Keira Knightley's name, so I was expecting her voice, but I hadn't sort of really looked through the rest of the cast list, and so many, very distinctive actors' voices that I was picking up all the way through, and sort of went back to look at the list. I was like, wow, you've got, Jim Broadbent, Mark Strong, Sam Claflin, and of course Marion Cotillard doing the French version, and very sadly, I think it was Helen McCrory is one of her last things that she did. So how did you put all these people together? And I guess it's not like you're having them all in the same room necessarily, but it must have been such a joy and privilege to work with so many talented actors.
Yes. It was incredible. It was a real blessing. And we did manage to organize the record so that two people would be in the booth at the same time. And given that it's drama, that's really important. They're not inventing the voice of a talking shoe, for instance. They're having these real scenes. And as good as a reader we could have hired to read with Keira, it would have been nothing like Jim actually reading with Keira. So we did plan to do that. And the screenplay, finished by David Bezmosges, is an incredible piece of work. And so I think it's a screenplay, which everyone loved to read. Kate Ringzell, our genius casting director based in London, and those two, and then Charlotte's story. I think people just wanted to join us, as Tahir said earlier, to recount Charlotte's story to the world. So I shouldn't make light of it. It's very hard to find a project that interests actors of that caliber. But in some ways, the process with Kate calling everybody and presenting it to everyone felt rather easy.
And I think what really struck me as well is, I guess, as you mentioned, that, on the face of it, it's a very tragic story, but through infused with something that feels hopeful and optimistic. And I think it's to do with, you know, her resilience and the fact that she sort of, regardless of what was going on around her, kind of found her way through. And then also the idea of art itself kind of being a form of therapy, a way for people to heal. And also, you know, the fact that she felt that her life was not going to be a long one. It was sort of her legacy, something she could leave behind. So I think there's all those sort of things which really can actually feel quite inspiring, despite the tragic nature of it and the darkness of some of the story.
You say it beautifully.
I just wanted to sort of highlight one of the things that you mentioned was that, you know, artist therapy is sorry, we got a kid in the background. Art, for Charlotte, I think art was her salvation, and it was a way for her to triumph, despite, you know, the tragic circumstances around her. So I think that's an important theme. That's a theme that a lot of artists, people that are either professionally or you know, fancy themselves as artists, they do find some escapism. And an ability to express themselves in a way they otherwise could not. And it's a way for Charlotte to have persevered so many years later. So that's a really important theme that I'm glad you picked up on.
But I also want to say that, you know, Life for Theatre is not just an intimate diary. So often we look at work made by women as an expression of feeling, and it is very expressive and full of emotion. But Charlotte Salaman was a learned young artist. There was conceptual. She was thinking about expressionism and different forms of art, and she was thinking about the formal aspects of making art. She called it life for theater. Is it true? Is it representation? And like a lot of contemporary, like writers, for instance, in the realm of autofiction, and she really was thinking a lot about what she was making, while she, of course, was feeling a tremendous amount or seeking salvation. But I just need to sort of put that in there too.
One question I had, the bit, because I think, you know, there's lots of sort of fully rounded characters, you know, and there's lots of flawed people we're looking at here. You know, it's not sort of black and white, good and bad. But in particular, when Charlotte poisons her grandfather, I didn't know how to take that. I just wondered what's your sort of reaction to that, or do you think that's just, you know, part and parcel of kind of going on the journey of her story, and, you know, it's there without judgment in some ways?
Who wants to jump on this? Who wants to catch this hot potato?
I think there is two ways to answer to that. The first one is, and I will let Julia to go through that, is what really happened, and with the foundation and everything like that we've been aware of after a while. And the other way, I can answer to that, but after Julia maybe answer to the first thing, because after that it's just a question of story and movies and everything. But I think there is the first way to answer to that, I will let Julia answer.
So we developed this film very closely with the Charlotte Salaman Foundation, as we wanted to. You know, it is a story of someone who lived, and we don't have a ton of detail, but we have what she left behind and other sources. And so the Charlotte Salaman Foundation, very briefly, it came to light around 2015. At the end of Life for Theatre, Charlotte has pages and pages where she paints words, like a text. And she had pages in which she confessed to poisoning her grandfather, and her stepmother took those out, the way that Otto Frank took some pages out when she gave it to the world, because she didn't want to perhaps blemish Charlotte's reputation. Perhaps, we're guessing. And remember, Charlotte called this Life for Theatre. So anyways, and yet the foundation said, well, because she wrote about it and because Paula took it away, we're going to include it in her official biography. So when I started this project 11 years ago, that was not known. And then the foundation said, well, it happened. And so at first we really worked on it in the screenplay and did something that we don't usually do, which is we created a moment that is not clear. And by that, I mean it has ambiguity. Usually in the screenplay, when someone does something, there's the intention of the screenwriters that this is what it is. And so we left it open for people to not know how to feel about that, to wonder if it's a mercy killing, and there's a lot of reason in the screenplay for you to think it is, or if it's her unburdening herself, more of an emotional option.
I think I'm almost out of time, but just very quickly, what do you hope people take away from watching it? I guess bringing her work to a much wider audience, but also kind of returning to this period of the Holocaust from kind of a fresh angle. And even though it's that specific period in history, there's kind of a universality to kind of remembering the humanity behind these stories, which, is eternally relevant and even in today's day and age.
You just took all of my answers, so I'll let. It's exactly that. It's just how relevant the story still is to this day, and that many people still face those sorts of discrimination and oppression, and that people understand that Charlotte was a person that endured and persevered, and that despite the most dire of circumstances, never lose hope, because you too can leave behind your own legacy.
And as universal as it is, it's also a time of rising anti-Semitism. And so it's a story about racism and discrimination, but it's also about racism and discrimination towards the Jews. So it's also reminding us that anti-Semitism specifically is alive and well. And then Eric can just talk about what we really want, because we really also just made a film about an artist. So what do we want, Eric, in terms of Charlotte as an artist?
It's funny. I was about to say, you said about the anti-Semitism and Tahir about the artist. I wanted just to say, to go the other way, which was, she was a teenager. She was a young girl. She was a teenager. She was someone who's like some other teenager was facing, trying to have the approval of her parents for things and confronting it. So all that started with a normal young woman, teenager, and after that she's been facing what was the family secret there was in her family, and after that there was the big history and the craziness of Germany in those times. So all starts with the normal people, with the normal character, and she's been taken through all that, and because the way she acted, because the way she wanted to answer or find answers, she became an artist. She was an artist because she went to school, but she used what she could do to raise her voice and to say something, to deliver something about herself, about lots of obstacles she had. And now on our side, we've been, this movie is to try to say, okay, you know what, she's been shut down, but here she is. And we want to remind people about the fact that that can happen to anyone. But at the same time, there are ways to be positive to that, because actually we've been able to do this movie and to now bring Charlotte back to light. So that's another very big thing. And the other thing is opening. I heard somebody saying in France that they studied they said everything starts with a word, and a bad thing or good thing. And I think that shutting down people words is bad. But so you have to speak. Secrets are not very good. We see that in the movie. So you have to raise your voice and speak.
And then use the words Charlotte Salomon in Google. Just Google her and look at her art and get as excited about her as we have been on this 10-year journey. So really, it's to celebrate the overlooked genius of this incredible painter, Charlotte Salomon.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And I really can't wait for everyone else to have the chance to see this really beautifully made and very moving film. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Very
Take
nice to
care.
chat to you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.